Good afternoon, Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter. This is Rich again, back for your second video blog of the day for Saturday, April 4th, 2015, around 3:38 p.m. in Belleville, Massachusetts. Windy out today, but sunny, highs in the 40s. Some news to report. The Boston Bruins assistant captain Patrice Bergeron is the Bruins nominee for the Masterton Award for dedication to hockey and perseverance. And also, sad news to report in the world of professional hockey. Elmer Latch, who was a Hockey Hall of Famer and played for the Canadiens, passed away at the age of 97. Prayers to his family. And it's Happy International Pillow Fight Day. That's about it on the news. My second video subject of the day is about regional wrestling territories, continuation series, and I reached Championship Wrestling from Florida. Championship Wrestling from Florida was one of the most famous NWA regional territories in history. It was run by professional wrestler Eddie Graham, and it had, like, the American Dream. Dusty Rhodes became a major wrestling star while in this promotion and booking this promotion. Plus, the matches were called by the legendary, late, great WWE Hall of Famer Gordon Solie, who was one of the best wrestling announcers of all time. The background of Championship Wrestling from Florida, it started in 1949 by a journeyman professional wrestler by the name of Clarence Cowboy Leto, who was famous for wrestling boxer Jack Dempsey in a boxing versus wrestling match, which was pretty good. And then Cowboy retired and he settled down in Florida and he started promoting wrestling cards throughout this great state of Florida, in Tampa, Orlando, and Miami. And it was a decent wrestling promotion until 1961, when Eddie Graham, who was a major wrestling star who wrestled in Capitol Wrestling for Vince McMahon Sr., moved his family to Florida. They settled in Florida, and Eddie Graham bought into the promotion run by Cowboy Leto, and the Championship Wrestling from Florida took off. Eddie Graham wrestled for them, plus he got affiliation with the NWA, so the NWA World Champions would come down and defend the title, like Luthez and Dory Funk Jr. and Gene Kiniski, plus they had other stars like Sam Steamboat, who had a famous wrestling angle with Boris Malenko, where Sam Steamboat attacked Malenko and he took out his false teeth. That was a famous wrestling angle on Championship Wrestling from Florida, called by Gordon Solie one of the most famous angles on television until the 1970s. And Championship Wrestling from Florida was filmed in a studio called Sportatorium that seated 100 people. It was a studio, and it was in the offices of Championship Wrestling from Florida in Tampa, Florida. Upstairs was the offices and the gyms. Gordon Solie called the action, and Championship Wrestling from Florida was shown throughout Florida and in select markets across the United States, including New York, Philadelphia, Chicago, and Boston for many years. And also other wrestlers who wrestled for Championship Wrestling from Florida was Hiro Matsuda, Danny Hodge, and others throughout the 60s. By the time the 70s rolled around, Eddie Graham became NWA president for many years, and he got to book the NWA World Champion. He had his guy, Jack Briscoe, to become NWA World Champion, who defended all across the country, and then Terry Funk. He brought other talent like Bob Orton Jr., Bob Ruth, Gary Hart, Cowboy Bill Watts, Robert Fuller, Don Morocco, Paul Jones, and several others, and Eddie Graham's son Mike wrestled for them as well, along with Steve Curran. But the biggest star in Championship Wrestling from Florida history was the American Dream, Dusty Rhodes, who started out as a heel, part of Gary Scott's stable with Pac Son in 1973, but in 1974 the American Dream, Dusty Rhodes, turned face on Pac Son and Gary Hart in a tag team match against Mike and Eddie Graham, which became very famous, most famous angle in Championship Wrestling from Florida history, which put Championship Wrestling Florida on the map as a great NWA regional territory. Eddie Graham had talent exchanges with many of his fellow NWA promoters, like he challenged exchange with Jim Crockett's Mid-Atlantic Championship Wrestling, Georgia Championship Wrestling, Vince McMahon's Worldwide Wrestling Federation, who would always sometimes get Andre the Giant down to Florida for the cards into the Armory in Tampa, Florida, or Miami, or Orlando, where they had a new arena called Bayfront Center, which was the equivalent of Madison Square Garden in Florida, and they had great cards there. Eventually they had like Harley Race become NWA World Champion. Eddie Graham controlled most of his bookings, and the Championship Wrestling from Florida was going hot. They brought down more wrestlers, including Rocky Johnson, Jerry Briscoe, gorgeous Jimmy Garvin, and so many others. And Championship Wrestling from Florida was becoming more and more popular, going worldwide, I mean nationwide, in select markets and stuff. And they promoted some cards in the Bahamas and stuff, which was pretty good. And by the early 1980s, Eddie Graham kind of started to lose power in the NWA. He really wanted Dusty Rhodes, his guy, his main attraction, as the longtime NWA World Champion. But Dusty Rhodes was just kind of a character wrestler, like an attraction like Andre the Giant and others, and he was really not really what you'd have a typical wrestling body, not a athlete and stuff. And the NWA World Champion was, could be a serious guy. Eddie Graham tried to get Dusty Rhodes a long-term NWA title reign, but it was blocked. Dusty held it 2 times while in Florida, while working for Championship Wrestling for Florida, but he was not a long-term NWA World Champion, which got Eddie Graham pissed off a lot. Eventually, he started to lose power to Jim Crockett, Mid-Atlantic Championship Wrestling, as like the head NWA promoter and stuff. But Eddie Graham continued to go strong with Championship Wrestling from Florida. He basically retired by the late 1970s and took a behind-the-scenes role of Championship Wrestling for Florida. Also around this time, they had a famous wrestling angle between Mr. Florida, who was #1 Paul Jones in a mask, and the Super Destroyer, who was Bill Irwin, managed by Oliver Humperdinck. And they had on Championship Wrestling for Florida the infamous cigar angle where Oliver Humperdinck lit up a cigar, because he would always do that when the Super Destroyer would always win. But the Super Destroyer lost to Mr. Florida and got Oliver Humperdinck irate, and then the Masked Destroyer grabs his little cigar and burns the eye of Mr. Florida in the mask, which was pretty good. It was a famous angle, and it had a conclusion and stuff like that. And by the mid-1980s, they had Ric Flair come down once in a while to defend the NWA World Champion against Dusty Rhodes or Mike Graham and stuff. And around 1982, they had more talent come into Championship Wrestling for Florida. Kevin Sullivan formed his Army of Darkness. He worshipped the devil, and he brought Jake the Snake Roberts as part of his stable. And others had Maniac Mark Lewin, Bob Roop became Moccasin. They had the Fallen Angel, who was Woman, and they had Luna Vachon, and they had the Wizard. King Curtis Iakea, who was known as the Wizard, and he was also, Kevin Sullivan would call him his father, but they weren't father and son in real life, because King Curtis was Hawaiian. And this was a great angle. Actually, they had an angle Christmas night where Kevin Sullivan wrestled the American Dream, Dusty Rhodes, in 1982, Christmas night 1982. Jake the Snake Roberts dressed as Santa Claus. It was a losers leave town match. Dusty Rhodes lost to Kevin Sullivan. Dusty Rhodes leaves Florida for a while, but he comes back as the Midnight Rider. It was Dusty Rhodes in a mask, and he was dressed up as a cowboy in a mask and stuff. Actually, Dusty the Midnight Rider won the NWA World Championship against Ric Flair in a house show in Miami in 1983, March of 1983, but he had it unmasked. But he gave the belt back, because if he unmasked, it was going to be Dusty Rhodes. And the storyline says if he unmasked, he would have been suspended from Florida for a year. And they couldn't do that. so he had to forfeit the NWA World Title and stuff. And also, around this time they had J.J. Dillon come down and become a manager and help with the book. They also had Blackjack Mulligan, his son Barry Windham, Brad Armstrong, Outlaw Ron Bass, the One Man Gang, Mike Rotundo, and others. Buddy Colt, who was a wrestler for Championship Wrestling from Florida in the 70s as a heel. He got into a playing class. He actually became like an announcer, helped with Gordon Solie, and he was also part owner. Also, Rowdy Piper was an announcer for Championship Wrestling from Florida for a while. They actually syndicated the programs outside of Florida under different names like Global Wrestling, United States Class Wrestling, American Championship Wrestling, and Southern Sports Wrestling. They syndicated those shows. They didn't have Gordon Solie call most of those matches. They had Coach John Heath or another person do it, and it lasted for a few years. And also, Championship Wrestling from Florida sent some talent to the first two Starcade and stuff for Jim Crockett Promotions. And also Bill Alfonso, famous for calling it down the middle, the famous wrestling manager in ECW, Taz, Rob Van Dam, and Sabu, started in Championship Wrestling from Florida as a referee. But by 1984, it was changing. The wrestling world was changing because WWE was going national. Soon, other regional wrestling promotions wanted to go national, especially Mid-Atlantic Championship Wrestling and Jim Crockett. Crockett calls up the American Dream. Jesse Rose offers him a place to become this star and his booker. Dusty takes the chance for that. Tucks up the offer, and then he brings many of his fellow Championship Wrestling from Florida as co-hosts, along with J.J. Dillon, Cowboy Ron Bass, Black Bart, Blackjack Mulligan, Barry Windham, Mike Rotundo. It was a devastating blow to Championship Wrestling from Florida, and Eddie Graham and Dusty Rhodes outside the ring had a close friendship. They were basically best friends, and Eddie Graham was hurt by that. Also, around this time, Eddie Graham was suffering from serious depression because he was going totally blind because his wrestling career, he was an alcoholic and other stuff. He committed suicide on Super Bowl Sunday 1985, which was the devastating blow to Championship Wrestling from Florida. Mike Graham took over as the owner. He had help from Hiro Matsuda and a couple of others. Legend had it Gordon Solie was a part owner, but that never was the case. There was rumors that Eddie Graham made that up, so no other wrestling organization could take him over, take him as an announcer and stuff like that. And Championship Wrestling from Florida continued to lose money and stuff, lose talent. They briefly brought the fabulous Freebirds, Michael PSAs, Terry Bam Bam Gordy, and Buddy Jack Roberts to wrestle for them. But it only lasted a few weeks, but they had an infamous wrestling angle where Michael PSA blamed the death of Eddie Graham on Mike Graham. That was a low wrestling angle, but it didn't go too far because the Freebirds just left as quickly as they come. And also around 1985, they got some talent back like Ravishing Rick Rude and Percy Pringle, who was Paul Bella, Jack Hart, who was Barry Horowitz, and others, but they left quickly. The Championship Wrestling from Florida had the Florida Heavyweight title, Southern Heavyweight title, and the U.S. Tag Team titles, their version of it. And also Wahoo McDonald came down for a while, Billy Jack Haynes, and superstar Billy Graham. But by 1986, the Championship Wrestling for Florida was on its last legs. They developed Lex Luger as a major star who basically started wrestling there in 1985. He became Florida champion within 20 days of his wrestling debut and stuff. But he was scooped up by Crockett and Mid-Atlantic Championship Wrestling and the house shows at Championship Wrestling Florida. Live attendance wasn't great. It was barely drawing any flies, and syndicated deals throughout the territory were drying up and stuff. They were being put overnight and stuff, and by early 1987, Jim Crockett Promotions, Mid-Atlantic Championship Wrestling, bought Championship Wrestling from Florida, they brought down some of their B-level talent to fill out the shows for Championship Wrestling from Florida, but the house shows continue to suck. They didn't even bring down the NWA World Champion Ric Flair during this time because Crockett stopped sending him in around 1986 to the shows for the house shows in Tampa and Orlando and Miami and stuff. And soon they got rid of Golden Slowly as host of Championship Wrestling from Florida. They had Steve Curran host it, which was an awful mess. And Championship Wrestling from Florida just faded off to the sunset by the fall of 1987, being very disappointing the way that Championship Wrestling from Florida ended. It was the hottest NWA regional promotion for years because of the American Dream, Dusty Rhodes, and Stephen A. Grimm being powerful in the 70s. It was a little too early for cable television, but if Championship Wrestling from Florida if Dusty Rhodes was hot in the 80s and Championship Wrestling from Florida, who knows, maybe Championship Wrestling from Florida would have been the main NWA promotion in the 1980s than Mid-Atlantic Championship Wrestling. And they had great talent and stuff. And they had the Dean of Wrestling announcers, Gordon Solie, who was obviously the best NWA announcer of all time and professional wrestling announcer of all time and stuff like that. And they tried to revive Championship Wrestling from Florida under the name Professional Wrestling from Florida in 1989, using the Sportatorium in Tampa, Florida, having some talent left over from the old Championship Wrestling from Florida days, but that didn't go too far. And they basically was just one of those indie promotions. And the tape library of Championship Wrestling from Florida was originally owned by Matt Graham. He came out with DVDs in the early 2000s, but they didn't sell pretty good. He sold the tape library to the WWE for a lot of money, and they're now in the property of World Wrestling Entertainment. They could show up in the WWE network anytime soon. There were some compilation tapes like The American Dream, Dusty Rhodes, The Story, and a few others. Mike Graham committed suicide in 2012 at the age of 61, which was very sad. And Championship Wrestling from Florida was a very great regional wrestling territory. And that's about it on that. Be back for the third and final video blog of the night about Jumping Joe DiMaggio, the Yankees Clipper. See you later.